If you ever find yourself along the south coast of England, between Seaford Head in East Sussex and the Seven Sisters Hills, you may see a curious sight on your journey. For along one side of the hill near the Cuckmere River, as it meanders to the sea, is a strange sight indeed. At first glance, it just appears to be a simple natural impression of chalk in the cliff, but local legends believe it to be something quite different and more sinister, for this innocuous scar in the landscape is the remains of a fierce giant creature known as Brimwyrm, the Sussex sea serpent of the Seven Sisters Seaford. The origins of this beast are unknown, but locals suggest it was a terrifying menace that terrorised all who saw it. Some say that it was over a mile long with sharp teeth, with a haunting hiss that echoed along the hills. He was thin and scaly of skin, white as the chalks of the cliffs, and Brimwyrm is also very, very hungry. Under the cover of darkness, on a high tide, Brimwyrm would sliver up the river from the sea. He could then make his way towards Seaford, where he would gorge on sheep. Some nights over 50 sheep could be taken, and then he would return to the sea. Nothing could stop this slimy monster. He was relentless and brutal. The townsfolk had no idea how to prevent the decimation of their livelihoods, but something needed to be done. One day, after a particularly ruthless night, the local townsfolk decided enough was enough. They needed a hero. They needed a saviour, a dragon slayer maybe. So a meeting was held where they could find their champion. Who better than George? Old George. Well, he ran the local pub. So they gathered down in the local pub and demanded, "He who is named after our most patron saint, tell us how to defeat the wretched Brimwyrm." "That awful, awful beast," came one voice. "Destroying our livelihoods he is," said another. "What if he starts taking the children? Oh God, won't somebody think of the children?" said a particularly hysterical person. George thought for a moment and he said, "It is said that Brimwyrm can only travel on the land to hunt under the protective cloak of the night. If any sunlight penetrates his skin, then he will instantly perish, for he dwells deep within the sea where no light can find him." Audible gasps were heard. "So we must find a way to keep Brimwyrm on the land come sunrise." "Impossible," the crowd protested. "If we make him fall asleep and maybe trap him in the river or something, that might work," suggested George. "No way to trap him. He's way too sleek and the river's way too wide. He's too cunning and he will never be fool enough to sleep on the land," someone replied. "It can't be done. We might as well cut our losses and get used to losing all the sheep," a particularly pessimistic person shouted. All seemed hopeless. They knew his weakness, but had no way of implementing or defeating him. Chaos ensued. There was arguing, shouting and general despair all over the room. Everyone was talking at once and no one was paying attention to anyone else until a mysterious voice from the back of the room near the fireplace spoke. "We use herbs, salt beer, and I will untie the wind." Until this point, no one had noticed that old Agatha West, the odd witch woman from the coastal cottages overlooking the sea, was there. Some have conjectured that she magically appeared there and she had not been there till this very moment. But that's another story. See, Agatha most of her years lived in a solitary life and was a wise woman and healer. She was connected with all living things. However, she knew that Brimwyrm must be stopped, and she'd worked out how to do it. What did she say? Balmy old hag. Thought she'd died last winter after the storm. What does she know? Beer, rope, magic? Ridiculous. Throw her out, someone. They were all laughing at her and jesting her until George stepped in. All I've heard tonight is everyone shouting, rejecting and dismissing every suggestion. There's not one of you that's even had the slightest plan. We must let her speak and hear her wisdom. For everyone has the right to a voice. If it weren't for Agatha, most of us may not be alive or healthy at least. If it weren't for her potions, remedies and cures, we may all be in a different place now. Agatha, please step up and speak. Agatha arose and appeared to glide across the room. like she was floating on air. A deathly hush came across the room. She had deep-set dark blue eyes and looked across the room, and everyone felt that she was looking directly at them. She spoke. "You must first gather herbs of valerian root, hops and lavender. This mixture we grind together with sea salt. We sow the blend into the fleece of some sheep, for a sacrifice of some sheep to Brimwyrm is unavoidable. But when he eats, after a while, he will have to sleep. But before this, the salt will give him a great thirst, and he will need to drink. Now the only safe drinking water is a pool further up the river, where it narrows. We will need to fill the pool with beer. The combination of beer and mutton will make him bloat. Sleep will overcome him, and by the morning sunrise, he will be no more." "Well, he may slumber heavy with all that," complained a voice. "But what if he wakes upon dawn's chorus? We need to trap him to stop him slithering back to the sea." "Of course," replied Agatha. "This is when I untie the winds." Now, untying the winds is an ancient custom where those well versed in the ways of weather law could trap the winds into a piece of rope using a knot and, of course, magical words. They would be then sold to mariners for their voyages. If there were no winds in their sails, the knots would be untied, releasing the winds. One such spell went like this: 1 knot for a breeze, 2 knots for a good wind, and 3 to summon a gale storm. Agatha continued to speak. "I think 3 knots should do it. After the last storm, the cliffs are much weakened, and if I speak the right words and dance as the wind is untied, the land will fall and narrow the river enough to trap him." Silence filled the room. George spoke. "Well, don't just sit there, people. We all have a job to do." Everyone busied themselves either gathering the magical mixture or loading barrels of Sussex's best onto carts to fill the pool. Others blended the mixture of herbs, flowers and salt, and they were covertly sewn into the fleeces of the sheep. Meanwhile, Agatha prepared her knots. She danced and chanted as she tied each rope. "Each knot I make to then untie, to stir the winds, to fill the skies." Those sacred words passed down to her by her grandmother. Her sacred rite was done, and night fell. It was a particularly high tide, a spring tide, and Brimwyrm was again hungry. He slithered and hissed as he made his way towards the shore, but his gluttony was to be his downfall tonight, and without knowing it, Brimwyrm had taken the bait. The plan seemed to be working, for after eating he did feel quite thirsty, so naturally moved up the stream to drink. The water tasted a bit odd, but he drank it anyway. Then a strange sensation of fullness came over him, so he started to head back home to the sea. But sudden tiredness and an overwhelming desire to sleep came over him. "Oh, I think I may have overdone it," he thought, and he yawned. "I'm sure tired though. Oh. There's enough night left for me to have a quick nap. Then I'll head home, yes." It was at this point the trap was slipped. Brimwyrm fell into a deep sleep, and Agatha, standing atop the cliff from the Seven Sisters, danced her blessed dance and said the magical words for untying the winds. "These knot is untied, so the cord is free. And as the first cord is free, the breeze shall be. This knot is untied, so the cord is free. As the second cord is freed, the wind shall be. This knot is untied, so the cord is free. As the third cord is freed, the storm shall be." As Agatha untied the last knot, she summoned huge storms and gales. It whipped between the 2 cliffs either side of the Cuckmere. All of a sudden, a landslide of mud, rocks and chalk came crashing down the narrow river, trapping Brimwyrm as he slept. And then the winds died away, seemingly as soon as they arrived, and slowly the sun gently rose above the horizon. The sea ebbed away, and the people held their breath. And as the sun gradually moved its way into the sky, its rays touched the earth, and a new day was beginning. Brimwyrm woke in a panic, but before he had even chance to contemplate how to free himself, let alone what was happening, the sun had reached his body. Boom! Brimwyrm was no more. He had completely dissipated, as if it had dissolved from his very being. In the cliff face to one side, a strange, long, thin white scar appeared, and it's been there ever since. So, things pretty much returned to normal in Seaford, and Brimwyrm stories became an urgent myth. May not have even happened, we don't really know. Agatha, well, she returned to her old life again, living alone, making her cures and generally being forgotten about, but that's how she liked it, really. However, it is said that her spirit is sometimes seen dancing on the cliffs up there, promising that she will return again in Seaford's hour of need.